Because society is so fascinated by VR, it's no surprise that many movies have explored the concept, and the horror genre has showcased just how terrifying virtual reality can be. Films like Dark City, The Lawn Mower Man, and The Cell prove this incredible technology can mess with your mind, figuratively and literally. Although virtual reality's capabilities are theoretically unlimited, the entries on this list prove the technology also has the potential to unleash infinite horror. So with that being said, I'm Jem from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 weirdest virtual reality horror movies. Number 10. Cube 2 Hypercube. In Cube, 6 strangers awaken in a gargantuan maze filled with booby-trapped rooms. With only one room leading to the exit, the group are forced to work together to escape. Cube did not make a splash at box office, but the Twilight Zone-inspired flick quickly became a cult classic. Because the film left so many questions unanswered, it wasn't long before the masses were hungry for a sequel. So, after 5 long years, Cube 2 Hypercube was finally released. Although this follow-up doesn't come close to matching its predecessor, it dials up the zaniness 100%. Instead of being trapped in a giant prison, our ensemble are locked in a virtual simulation of a 4th-dimensional tesseract that exists outside space and time. Because the tesseract isn't bound by the laws of physics, characters die and are resurrected before dying again. One person might move in slow motion while another person moves at super speed. We see people being ripped apart by killer cubes, exist in multiple timelines at once, and age decades in mere seconds. Like the original, it's better not to try and understand Hypercube. Instead, just enjoy the ride. Number 9. Brainstorm. Brainstorm is a 1980s sci-fi thriller centering around a technology that allows people to enter the minds of others. Because virtual reality was in its infancy during this era, you'd assume this film would ease viewers into the concept gently to help them digest the complex storyline. However, Brainstorm is not afraid to explore many scenarios which the average moviegoer at the time had never even given a second of thought to. What happens if you enter the mind of someone while they divulge governmental secrets? What happens if you experience someone else's death? Brainstorm may not scare you like a conventional horror, but scenes like this are sure to leave you rattled. Even though most films of this decade struggle to showcase virtual reality with convincing special effects, the visuals in Brainstorm are surprisingly impressive and pretty trippy. Due to the sudden death of the lead actress, Natalie Wood, the studio tried to kill the film, which is why few people have seen or heard of Brainstorm. This is a pity, since this underrated gem has plenty of ideas that are intriguing, innovative, and genuinely frightening. Number 8. Arcade. In Arcade, Alex heads to the local arcade, only to discover a virtual reality arcade machine called Arcade. Honestly, it's hard to talk about this movie without saying arcade a lot. To ensure Garmin spread the word, the studio's employees offered Alex a free copy so she can play it on her home console. However, Alex discovers that anyone who loses Arcade will become trapped in the virtual world by a game's villain. Arcade. Maybe take a shot every time we say arcade. Although Arcade sounds like a horror version of Tron, the atrocious visuals and awful script make it impossible to take seriously. Like the Lawn Mower Man, every virtual scene is crammed with unconvincing CGI, making the scariest moments unintentionally hilarious. Even though metal piranhas are supposed to be creepy, they look like enemies from Super Nintendo's Star Fox. When you hear lines like, "I think the game is alive somehow," uttered with sincerity, you can't help but laugh. Although there's a lot of weird moments in Arcade, probably the most peculiar thing about it is how the script was written by David S. Goyer, the same guy behind the Dark Knight trilogy. Number 7. Dark City. Dark City opens with a man called John Murdoch awakening in a bathtub with no memory of who he is. While John tries to piece his life together, he notices the city is constantly shifting around. The citizens keep having their memories reset, and a group of insidious strangers seem to be following him. If you haven't seen Dark City, you may know it as the movie that did The Matrix before The Matrix did. Since The Matrix became one of the most celebrated sci-fi films ever, Dark City is now perceived as the inferior version. Sorry, but there are some elements that work better in Dark City than in Wachowski's defining work. Instead of revealing the big mystery in a colossal exposition dump, this neo-noir unfolds unveils the mystery slowly. Every 10 minutes or so, a crucial tidbit is revealed, which keeps us constantly invested. Although you'll be left scratching your head for most of the runtime, everything will be explained before the end. Number 6. Brain Scan. Brain Scan follows an avid gamer called Michael, played by Edward Furlong, who's bored of playing the same old titles. After hearing about a virtual reality system called Brain Scan that allows the player to take on the role of a serial killer, Michael is desperate to get his hands on a copy. Upon his first playthrough, Michael is blown away by how realistic the gameplay is, but after watching the news, he discovers the murders he committed in the game are happening in real life. Just when you thought things couldn't get more surreal, Brain Scan's host Trickster materializes in the real world and begins tormenting Michael. With Trickster's inhuman appearance, 1980s mullet, and his decision to introduce himself with a Primus tune, you can't help being weirded out by this dude. Even though Brain Scan failed to wow anyone upon its release, its premise will resonate with audiences of today, since modern titles like Shadow of the Colossus and The Stanley Parable deliberately make gamers feel guilty for acting immorally. You know what? Brain Scan will make you feel bad the next time you have to snuff out the NPC while playing Grand Theft Auto. Number 5. The Dungeon Master. In Dungeon Master, a malevolent wizard challenges a computer programmer called Paul to a contest to see whether magic or technology is stronger. After the sorcerer inserts him into a computerized reality, Paul must face many trials and tribulations to return to his world. If you want to watch a truly great virtual reality flick, steer clear of the Dungeon Master. Cinematography is poor, the special effects look cartoonish, and the acting is bad, even by B-movie standards. But we've got to commend the Dungeon Master for going against the grain. Throughout the story, Paul is thrusted into multiple different levels where he faces golems, trolls, and zombies. To make sure each of the 7 scenarios felt unique, they had a different director at the helm. Because of this, the Dungeon Master feels like 7 mini-movies, each with drastically different visual and cinematic styles. The Demons of the Dead is pure horror, the Stone Canyon Giant level feels like a love letter to Ray Harryhausen fantasy, and the slasher level is a slasher. If you want to watch a virtual reality flick that's not afraid to try something different, then The Dungeon Master is worth a watch. Number 4. Existence. In this horror thriller, a gaming company developed a simulated game called Existence, hoping to test it with a focus group. However, the creation of such advanced VR has inspired radicals to assassinate gaming developers to stop them from deforming society. After the company lead designer is shot by an assassin, one of the focus group clients, Pickle, played by Jude Law, is entrusted to test Existence himself. Because Pickle keeps jacking in and out of the game while assassins are trying to kill him, our reluctant hero starts struggling to differentiate between reality and fantasy. While you're watching the film centered around an artificial landscape, you are waiting for the moment when the lead has trouble deciphering which reality is the real one. Although this concept can be cliched, Existence handled this trope really well, since the viewer cannot tell how much of what they're watching is occurring in the simulated world. Just when you think you know what's going on, Existence will pull the wool over your eyes, leaving you stumped yet again. And since Existence was directed by David Cronenberg, the film is filled with all the gooey, slimy visuals you've come to expect from the body horror filmmaker. Number 3. The Lawn Mower Man. Nobody is gonna pretend that The Lawn Mower Man is great. The story's author, Stephen King, was so unhappy about how it turned out that he sued the studio. But that doesn't mean this adaptation doesn't have some creatively terrifying ideas. The Lawn Mower Man centers around a virtual reality researcher, played by Pierce Brosnan, who uses VR and psychoactive drugs on chimpanzees to enhance their intelligence. Pressurized to use a human test subject, Lawrence encourages a mentally disabled man called Job to take part in the experiments, promising that they will make him smarter. Although the tech boosts Job's intelligence, he also develops psychic abilities and a strong desire for absolute power. Now let's be honest, the special effects in the virtual reality segments are shoddy, but the idea that using virtual reality can cause irreversible damage to your brain is a haunting thought. Even though some of the death scenes look silly, watching people dying from using the virtual simulator or shriveling up by being consumed by the tech are genuinely unnerving to watch. Let us know what you think in the comments down below, and while you're there, drop us a like, share and subscribe. Number 2. The Cell. Most directors tend to be extremely careful when preparing their first feature. Since they're still testing the waters, it's not uncommon for a filmmaker's first outing to be small in scope and a straightforward story. But Tasm Singh went to the other extreme. Not only does his feature debut, The Cell, have one of the most magnificent aesthetics ever to put to film, it's his most ambitious project to date. In the film, psychologist Catherine Dean, played by Jennifer Lopez, uses VR technology to enter the minds of coma patients. When the FBI asks Catherine to use the device to enter the minds of a serial killer Starga, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, to find one of his victims, she reluctantly agrees. As she navigates through the psychopath's disturbing memories and sickening fantasies, Catherine worries she might lose her sanity as well as her life. Even though the story is a bit of a muddle, it's impossible not to be blown away and freaked out by the visuals that manifest in the killer's mind. Disassembling horse pieces, in testing pulling torture devices. Also, watching D'Onofrio at his most maniacally gleeful is as compelling as it is disturbing. You may not like The Cell, but it's worth watching, purely to bear witness to the creatively deprived visuals. And number 1, Videodrome. Videodrome was released in 1983, when virtual reality barely existed. The term virtual reality was only coined the following year. Even though the concept wasn't well known at the time, David Cronenberg's magnum opus still managed to handle the concept of reality merging with an artificial world so flawlessly, it's allowed Videodrome to remain relevant 40 years after its release. The story centers around TV station programmer Max Wren, played by James Woods, who's desperate to boost his ratings. When he stumbles upon an awful channel called Videodrome, Max orders for it to be broadcast on his channel. Soon after, Max begins suffering from horrific hallucinations and finds himself unable to tell what's real anymore. Even though any true horror fan has seen Videodrome, it's worth a revisit, since it's probably more harrowing than you remember. The way it highlights humanity's reliance on technology and obsession with questionable entertainment isn't just creepy but prophetic. In fact, the film's themes are so spot on of today's society, one may find it more disturbing than the iconic visuals. Even though we all remember the "long live the new flesh" chant and the cerebral imagery, it's Videodrome's grim and accurate outlook on humanity's future that stays with you.